Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
The symptoms go away when I'm as strict carnivore as possible, where I'm pretty much a purist of like red meat, salt, tallow, eggs, like purist. And then when I get back to that really good baseline, I can start to incorporate other foods. But when I deviate from the plan, when I eat things out that are fried in seed oils, if I'm not sleeping enough or I'm traveling or I'm stressed out, I will start to notice some of those flares again. So I think a good little story is that the last 2 months, Harrison and I were doing a ton of travel. We were speaking. I was still working a corporate 9 to 5 prior to going full time at the Meat Mafia. It was just stressed out and not sleeping enough and traveling too much. And I started not eating great. And I started noticing my stomach was flaring up. So now I'm back in San Diego with an extended period of time here. And I've really prioritized, 8 hours of sleep, meditation, cooking all of my meals, being very meat based, controlling all my inputs, and my stomach, is starting to feel way better just from doing that.
Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm Brian Gryn, and I'm here to give you actionable tips to get your body back to what it once was 5, 10, even 15 years ago. Each week, I'll give you an in-depth interview with a health expert from around the world to cut through the fluff and get you long-term sustainable results. This week, I interviewed Brett and Harry from the Meat Mafia. We discussed Brett's battle with ulcerative colitis and how he overcame this by establishing a meat-based approach, along with Harry's health habits, which helped him lose over 20 pounds. We also chatted about the importance of eating real foods, Brett and Harry's routine for health, advantages of raw dairy, should you eat chicken, and their one tip to get your body back to what it once was. Really enjoyed meeting Brett and Harry. A lot to learn from them, the Meat Mafia, and I think you'll really enjoy this interview. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm excited to have Harry and Brett on from the Meat Mafia. Thanks so much for joining me.
Brian, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us, Brian.
Thanks for coming on. I was just saying it's good to put a face to the name of the Meat Mafia, and you guys are on Twitter, all over social media, blogging, got your own podcast, and it's called the Meat Mafia podcast, right?
Yes,
it
sir.
is. It is called the Meat Mafia podcast.
And would you start January 2022? I see.
Yeah, so we started the podcast in March.
Okay.
And in January is when we really started writing online. So we kind of morphed from writing and blogging about these different nutrition topics that we were really just kind of like dipping our toe in the water, and then started to see a little bit of success. And both Brett and I are ex-athletes. So as soon as we saw something that we could measure, both of us kind of just started getting competitive with it and getting excited about what we were putting out there. So the writing picked up, and we were like, how else can we evolve this and start to create a little bit of a brand and a voice behind the messages that we want to put out there? And the podcast was just such a great platform for us to be able to do that. So we've done 110 episodes or so, recorded about 115 in the last 6-7 months. So we've been hitting it hard, but it's been great way to connect with some pretty powerful minds in this space of health and nutrition. So we got connected through Brad Kearns. So this is we had him on the podcast early on as well. So that's a great way to just connect and network with people.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you guys are both vegans.
We are. We're huge plant-based advocates.
Yeah, I got to get some plant-based guys on here, but eventually I will. But you guys, obviously, with the Meat Mafia podcast, animal-based. Maybe I know, Brett, I've heard your story a little bit. Maybe explain your story, and then here maybe follow up how you guys, started writing about animal-based living and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, I think it's important to note too, right? Like both Harry and I, like a lot of what we're building out right now, it's kind of centered around like our friendship. Like we're really close personal friends first before we even started the podcast. And we have this, discovered that we've had this mutual interest in nutrition and our food system. And, what's really changed over the last 50 years that's led to chronic disease being so high and obesity being so high. And we're very firmly convinced that it's the food, right? It's like we don't eat food anymore. We eat food-like substances that are found in the inner aisle of the grocery store. And, neither of us are MDs. We're not nutritionists. We don't have a, degree in exercise science. We're really just people that went on our own journey and had our own experiences with nutrition and have made this shift from unhealth to health. So, for me personally, my journey was really based on some autoimmune diseases that I was looking to cure. So, or more so clear up. So as Harry mentioned, we both played college baseball together, and a lot of the way that I viewed nutrition was just justified on the fact that, like, it's calories in, calories out. I'm weight training, I'm going to practice, I'm on my feet all day, so I can kind of eat whatever I want, and that's just going to be used to fuel me. So pre-workout powders, protein shakes. In college, I was probably drinking too much alcohol, eating too much processed food, not sleeping enough, and overly stressed out. And in 2016, when I was going into my senior year, I was interning in New York City, and I was living at home in New Jersey with my parents. So I would commute in and then commute back home. And I started noticing that train ride in and from the city was becoming more and more uncomfortable because I was developing this urgency to go to the bathroom. I started noticing that in June. And then I started noticing blood in my stool. And I just, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was thinking that I was invincible or being naive or being embarrassed. I just didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell my family. And my stomach continued to flare up and get worse and worse. And by August of that summer, I was going to the bathroom over 20 times a day. I lost about 30 pounds. I ended up having to get rushed to the hospital. And I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is an incurable autoimmune disease. It's in the family of IBS, Crohn's, and it affects your large intestine, your colon. And it's all from inflammation. So you basically develop these bloody ulcers, and you're told that it's an incurable disease. You have to go on drugs and medication for the rest of your life. So for me, I was put on this medication called Remicade, which it's a biologic drug that gets administered through an infusion. You get it once every 8 weeks. It cost me about $50,000 per infusion. So I was personally costing the medical system about $400,000 a year. And there's somewhere between 600 to 900,000 people in the country that have colitis. So you can do the math on just how much these diseases are costing our medical system, let alone all the other autoimmune diseases that are now existent that really didn't exist 100 years ago. So, for me, I'm on these drugs. And in 2018, 2019, I'm living on my own in New York for the first time, and I'm living with a bodybuilder. So he's starting to teach me about cooking my own meals. And I started noticing that when I was eating ground beef, steak, chicken, and I was cooking in butter, olive oil, tallow, my stomach was feeling better. But so I noticed it, but didn't think too much of it. And then I stumbled across Dr. Sean Baker's podcast on Joe Rogan in 2019, which was instrumental to so many people, because for anyone that doesn't know Dr. Baker, he's probably the most well-known carnivore doctor that exists. He's an amazing guy, high-level athlete, emergency surgeon. And his whole theory is that we've evolutionarily evolved to be carnivores, and animal products are the most nutrient-dense foods that we should be eating. And they're also the most absorbable and the most digestible. So I listened to this podcast, and then I started noticing on Reddit and on Google that there were all these people that were anecdotally talking about curing their autoimmune conditions. So people that had colitis, Crohn's, eczema, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, they're talking about eating all meat, and their conditions are essentially going away. So for me, I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, if I can use diet and lifestyle to correct this and get off this drug and medication, why would I not do that? So in 2019, I went carnivore. I told myself I was going to do it for about 2 weeks, stayed on it for a few months, and almost instantaneously, I went down to like 1 to 2 bowel movements a day. My skin cleared up. My anxiety went away. I was putting muscle on at the gym like it was incredibly effortless because my body was just responding to all this nutrient dense food. And over the course of about 3 years, I completely reversed any inflammation or microinflammation I had. And my GI actually was comfortable getting me off of Remicade in March of 2021. So, that's a little over a year ago. And like anything else, right? It's like I just started small. I started buying grocery store quality meat, and have since, we've made a big investment to start to buy the really good quality grass-fed, grass-finished meat from the local farmer. and have incorporated different things like some fruits, bone broth, tallow, etc. But for me, that's really my story of like using diet and lifestyle to cure something that I thought was incurable. And a lot of what we're trying to do through our podcast is to try and make these stories become, more and more common, as opposed to just being another patient, in the medical system going through that whole carousel.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Harry, I know other than being friends with Brett, what you don't have to have some amazing story, but I'm curious to know how you got into sort of this side of the nutrition world.
Yeah, mine is much less of a heroic story than Brett's, but my change didn't really come out of necessity, so to speak, like Brett's. It was more so, after being a college athlete and previously, I was very much a disciplined person in the gym, but I think I'd always kind of experimented with food, but realized that I could get away with a lot more, similar to how Brett described it. You can, have those cheat meals or whatever however you want to define them, if you're really active in the gym. And I utilized that, through my playing career. There were certain stints where I really dialed in the nutrition. So like in college, when I was playing baseball, I was eating a paleo diet for a while and like felt incredible. Which was to be fair, like none of my other teammates were doing that. So like I was ahead of the curve at that moment in time. And then, fast forward a few years after my playing career, and I'm working a job in finance, high stress job, and just not nearly as active as I used to be. And I start, noticing the changes that a lot of people in their mid-20s realize, which is like, hey, me drinking beers on the weekends and ordering food to my house and snacking during the workday, this whole lifestyle is starting to catch up to me, and I'm not looking and feeling the way I used to. And so, when COVID hit in 2020, I had a lot of time. My job sort of paused, like there was not a whole lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just didn't have to commute. So I had all this time back in the bank, and I really started focusing that time intentionally on getting my health back in order, which, it wasn't, if you'd see me, you wouldn't be like, that guy's unhealthy, but I really dialed it in. And it was through like a ketogenic animal-based diet where I really started to see these amazing effects. And I think the light bulb went off for me where I was like, this needs to be a part of how I'm living my life going forward, when I went really low carb and started feeling some of the effects of having a fat adapted lifestyle, not being reliant on carbohydrates for energy, like the energy swings throughout the day, not feeling those crashes after a sugary meal, like really incorporating saturated fats. And so for me, that's when the light bulb went off. And I pushed it even further, started experimenting with the carnivore diet, and have kind of found my sweet spot since then, which is just, animal-based, really high quality animal meat, sourcing, as Brett said, sourcing from regenerative farms if we can, and just getting the right food on the plate. So, we're obviously huge proponents of the meat-based diet for a lot of reasons, but I think the nutrient density and saturated fat component of the animal-based diet has really worked for me, in terms of just mood, energy levels, weight stability, like performance. It's all better because I think, that nutrient density in the high saturated fat.
Yeah. And like we were talking, Brad Kearns and I have talked about this, that a lot of times it's the things that you eliminate that really you get your biggest bang for your buck. I mean, I've had so many different people, and I'm sure you guys have as well, like on my podcast that, might promote different ways of eating. But I think maybe the one thing that runs true with all of it is the fact that you're getting rid of these highly processed foods, these highly palatable foods, like the high fat, high carb combination. And, like what you did, Brett, with getting into carnivore, you could look at that as the ultimate elimination diet. And especially for someone that is having gut issues, that might be the first step to take.
100%. And I think too, to everything that you're saying, Brian, it's like we've kind of, we feel like we've lost our ability to really take ownership and control, or like a sense of what's going on with your stomach and your body. It's like we're just, as a society, it's like we're eating so much processed food, and we just kind of accept to have chronic gut issues or IBS or feel groggy when we wake up. And that really shouldn't be the case. That's not how we're programmed to be as human beings. So I would say with the Meat Mafia, Harry and I have changed our tune a little bit, where when we came out of the gates, we came out hot, like really pushing carnivore and animal based. And we've changed more to the tune of what you just mentioned, is that we're just trying to get people off of processed foods and eating real foods. So our definition of real food is any combination of meat, fish, egg, fruit, vegetable, raw dairy, if you can tolerate it. And it's about like taking sense of what really feels good with your stomach, like doing that self-experimentation, keeping a food journal. And maybe you are incorporating more plant-based foods. Maybe you're just eating carnivore. Maybe you're eating ketogenic. We really try and push, like, find what combination of those real foods works best for you and just run at it. And don't just accept what other people are telling you and take that as face value.
Yeah. I mention self-experimentation all the time, because it's something that I do for myself, because I've evolved. I mean, we've all evolved. I've evolved over the last few years. I mean, I used to be, and I still do, fasting. And I was pretty fasting, low carb for a while. And then I used to have, and then recently I've had conversation with Brad, who's had like Jay Feldman on his podcast. And he's been a guest on mine. It hasn't come out yet, but I think that you have to sort of find where you're at, like take a baseline, maybe get some blood panels, maybe get a DEXA scan and just see where you're at. And then, dial in the nutrition, because like you said, I mean, what one person can tolerate, someone else might not be able to.
I think another key component of all this is the idea of intuition around food, where it feels like our compass around what we should be eating has been completely disrupted. And now there's so many options of what can be considered food. But if you go into the grocery store, we know like most of the things in there aren't even really food. They're not satiating you. They're not providing you with a dense level of nutrition. So in an hour, you're still going to be hungry. And so, when it comes to actually eating the right things, it's like, hey, you need to kind of experiment and build that intuition. That's why I love fasting. I think fasting is one of those things that it's like cleaning the whiteboard, and then you can start incorporating things back in. I think it's like in a similar sense, like carnivore does the same thing. You eliminate all the processed food, and then you start reintroducing things back in. You go, okay, yeah, like I can incorporate raw dairy because it actually does sit well with me. You can kind of isolate some of the variables.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as fasting, like, yeah, I guess my viewpoint on it has changed a little bit. Like, I don't think it's really not a black and white thing, but I do think it's something that everyone should incorporate to some degree, because it just gives you flexibility, and it allows you to and it also gives you like structure throughout the day. I think like maybe you're cutting off your eating window at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and most of the things that we eat after that aren't probably that nutritious anyway. So it gives you boundaries, and it gives you also flexibility that if you do have to skip a meal, you don't feel like you have to like run to some fast food joint and get some junk.
Yeah. It almost feels like you have a superpower because you're not a slave to your hunger, because number one, you're eating so much protein and you're eating so much fat that you're incredibly satiated. So like if you say you are at a workouting or something and there's nothing that's really like edible or fits your diet, it's just junk. You don't feel like you need to eat it. You can just skip a meal or go get something afterwards. And, people think that's crazy because like you guys were talking about before, our palate is just so wired for that processed food that's loaded with refined grains and sugars. And you're just riding that roller coaster all day long. And you feel like you're going to die if you don't eat something within the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And you guys, how old are you guys? I'm just curious. In their 30s?
28, 29. Yeah.
Just turned 29.
You guys are young.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say, like, what you could get away in your 20s, and you're still in your 20s, you can't really get away with in your 30s, and you definitely can't get away with. I'm 42. So, but I feel a lot younger than that. So,
which is an amazing thing, where you don't feel like you're like a victim because your age is getting older. And I'm sure you have friends that are probably declining, and you're like, well, I feel better than I've ever felt. I could probably kick my ass at 25. Like it's a cool thing.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad, and I'm blessed that I've got into this health and wellness game, because you do see it. You see people that, they're, even if they're 40 years old, they look like they're 55, 60 years old, but So yeah, it is a sad thing. It is amazing what you can do. I was just looking at some of your posts on Instagram about some of the best health hacks that are free.
Mm.
Um, and obviously a lot of them: sex, sun, sleep, sprints, walking, stretching. Are these things that you guys try to bring into your life on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah,
Especially
definitely. Especially the top of the list. No,
yeah.
yeah. So, I'll tie this back into my story around when I started changing some of my health habits at the beginning of COVID, because, gyms were shut down, and I was like, I can just simplify this whole thing and focus on the fundamentals. So all I was doing was cooking my meals and then walking a bunch.
Mm.
And then I slowly started incorporating some other things, like I had these Olympic pull-up rings. I would use those, use a band. So I'm like very much of the school of thought of like the fundamentals win in the long run.
Mhm.
And so all of those things that you can do are free. And I think like meditating, journaling, walking, are all just incredibly, incredibly powerful tools if you just give them time to like really be built into your daily routine. I think they help. Walking for me is meditation and some of the best form of movement. Like I think I recover better when I walk more. You get into a state where you're actually burning fat at a pretty high rate too. You don't need to be dripping in sweat to be burning fat. So there's a lot there, and I do just kind of fundamentally believe that people try to overcomplicate a lot of the fitness world when you can kind of break it down to a few simple principles if you're just disciplined around it.
Yeah, I think you named two great points there that I love to do is cook. My wife and I, we cook for ourselves like all the time. Probably
Yeah.
not.
Yep.
We never really like to go out to dinner, but sometimes you do. Whatever, it's all good. And then walking, like obviously, you have two dogs, and those two things. I feel like if everyone did those two habits, they'd be a lot better off.
I literally lost 20 pounds basically just doing that, focusing on those two things for like really 4 weeks. And I was like, by the end of that 4 weeks, I was like, man, I've made some serious progress. Now it's time to start building on this. And the next month was even better. Like I really saw some serious results on top of that. So it's pretty amazing what you can do when you just try to simplify it and just be consistent with it.
Now, Brett, I'm curious. You've obviously started off as carnivore, and you had
Mhm.
obviously the gut issues that
Yep.
have those pretty much gone away.
Yeah, they've pretty much completely gone away. And why the reason why I say pretty much is that you're technically not cured, but I would say my symptoms are completely gone. But what I've noticed is the symptoms go away when I'm as strict carnivore as possible, where I'm
Mm.
pretty much a purist of like red meat, salt, tallow, eggs, like purist.
Hmm.
And then when I get back to that really good baseline, I can start to incorporate other foods. But when I deviate from the plan, when I eat things out that are fried in seed oils, if I'm not sleeping enough or I'm traveling or I'm stressed out, I will start to notice some of those flares again. So I think a good little story is that the last 2 months, Harrison and I were doing a ton of travel. We were speaking. I was still working a corporate 9 to 5 prior to going full time at the Meat Mafia. And was just stressed out and not sleeping enough and traveling too much. And I started and not eating great. And I started noticing my stomach was flaring up. So now I'm back in San Diego with an extended period of time here, and I've really prioritized, 8 hours of sleep, meditation, cooking all of my meals, being very meat based, controlling all my inputs, and my stomach, is starting to feel way better just from doing that. So I think it really just depends on your body, where there's certain people where their autoimmune conditions are so chronic that they have to be that strict. Like Michaela Peterson's a perfect example of that. If she's not beef, lamb, salt, water, her arthritis goes crazy. But then there's other people that have maybe lost 100 pounds on carnivore and they start introducing fruits and vegetables, and their stomach does tolerate it. And I think that's the goal. And that's what Harry touched on before is like, if you can tolerate these things and you enjoy them and you're getting micronutrients from them, why would you not try and at least incorporate them back into your diet?
Now, do certain things that obviously irritate your gut more than others? Like, can you tolerate like fruit, or is that?
Yeah, I can tolerate fruit. I can tolerate raw dairy. The interesting thing about raw dairy is that Harry and I were just talking about this. There were a bunch of studies from doctors in the 1800s, 1900s that used all raw milk dairies to cure chronic disease and ulcerative colitis and IBS, which is really interesting. Um, but yeah, I would say I can tolerate fruit. I can tolerate raw dairy. Some vegetables, yes, like dark leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables, they do not sit particularly well. I love to mix in like garlic and onions and saute that stuff to make the meat taste better. But sometimes my stomach can be a little bit iffy with that. But really how I learned this whole process is I just kept a food journal where I would write down what time I ate, what I ate, and then how did I feel after that meal? Did I have to go to the bathroom? Did my energy level feel good? And it sounds simple, but if you can do that for a month to 2 months, you have all this pattern recognition and you can start to realize what foods you were eating that made you feel really good and what foods were you introducing that might have disrupted your gut or not be the best thing for you personally.
Yeah, yeah. Having a food journal, I'm a big fan. Guess something I did for myself and for a lot of my clients, because if you don't write stuff down, you just lose track of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like I know people don't like to track calories, and I wouldn't say I'm the biggest calorie counter, but I think it's good to do for a little while just to sort of see where you're at as far as a baseline. Because for a while I was eating one, maybe two meals a day, and I just realized I just wasn't eating enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some people in the low carb world can fall under that because you're eating such highly satiating foods, and it's like, oh, I'm not hungry, I'm just not going to eat. And if you're active like you guys, young, working out, things like that, you start to realize, well, maybe I do need to start eating a little bit more. And that's sort of the self experimentation that I'm doing right now, is trying to consume more. And takes a little while to get used to it, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
actually not minding it right now.
It's actually a really good point in terms of the caloric deficit because it eventually catches up to you.
Yeah.
Especially if you are eating really good high quality foods, but you're not getting enough of them, like you will eventually start to feel the pains of that.
Yeah, and I did a blood panel. Thyroid was a little bit lacking, a little bit dehydrated, and it was tough for me to get enough protein, I'd say. I mean, I've had a lot of protein people on my podcast, and if I'm 175, let's just say I should be getting maybe about 150 grams of protein. Let's I don't know if I really want to get that all in one meal.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, what are your routines now? Maybe Harry, what are you typically doing as far as eating and working out?
Yeah, so I'm Brett and I are both pretty big into the endurance sport space. And
Nice.
I have a race coming up here in the next few months. So right now I'm trying to do a lot of my training in the mornings fat adapted, so like fasted training, and kind of hold out on eating until like 11 o'clock. But before I train, I'll usually crush like a coffee with some like MCT oil or some butter in it and get some fats in. So like that's like my form of uh getting some calories in, but not having any sort of glucose response. And then my I try to keep a tight eating window. I think time and money are the two biggest constraints for everyone when it comes to food. And I just like being productive with my time. And so in the morning, I can just not even worry about food, focus on all the other stuff that I want to do, have like a 3 hour eating window where I'll cook, some ground beef. Usually it's like ground beef and eggs. Like I just keep it pretty simple. And put in some fermented veggies, pickles, onions, sauerkraut, kimchi, and
Mhm.
just keep some variety in there. And then yeah, for the most part, like that will be like meal number one. That's usually like a pound and a half of ground beef, and then meal number two will be probably something similar. Might be like different style of eggs, frittata, or like if I have the right meat, do like a chuck eye, or I just ordered a quarter cow, so I've got a freezer full of beef right
Oh,
now. So I'm going all in on a lot of just meat based meals. So I got a variety of stuff that I can pull from now, which is nice. But I mean, that's usually it. And I probably am in terms of caloric, like the calories I need to get. I try to just get as much fat in through like coffee. Like whenever I have a coffee, I'm dumping a ton of butter in it. So that's like a way that I try to sneak in a few extra calories throughout the day, 2 or 3 times throughout the day.
Okay. Yeah. And Brett, what about you?
Yeah, I would say that my eating style is pretty similar to Harry's. I'm not training for an endurance event right now. I'm doing just more like heavy weight training. And have noticed a huge, like a lot of people talk to us about, they feel like they're unable to put on muscle mass or gain weight on a low carb diet. And I feel like maybe they're not eating enough, because every time I've trained pretty hard with the weights at a good intensity and eat animal protein consistently, I have no issue putting on muscle and weight. Like I think I'm close to like 188 right now, and I normally walk around at like 180-ish. So I think it's a good testament to, like, if you're eating the right way and training the right way, even if you are lower carb, you shouldn't have any issues putting density on. But for me, very similar. I start off in the morning. I mix in a packet of Element just to kind of front load electrolytes, sodium, magnesium, potassium into water, and then throw some heavy cream into my coffee. I really am not a huge breakfast guy. Like there's some mornings where I just listen to my stomach, where if I am hungry, I'll throw on 3 or 4 eggs from the local farm and cook that. But most mornings I'm really not eating breakfast. And then around like 11 to 12, my stomach will start to grumble and want some food. And it's any combination of ground beef, steak, chicken thighs. That's typically like the big three that I'll alternate between. Maybe I'll throw in some pickles, maybe some avocado, maybe some cheese. And then dinner is typically like a big steak, like a pound plus of meat. And I just eat that until I'm full. And I think you touched on cutting your meals a little bit earlier. That's something that I haven't done in the past, that I've really been focusing on the last few weeks, just to try and optimize that sleep quality. So I've been trying to cut all my meals by like 7:30, and I've been noticing a big difference in my sleep quality. And then another thing with gut health is, if I'm ever having issues with my gut, I will mix in a fair amount of bone broth too. And I know that that's something Harry does as well, like 3 to 4 cups a day if I really need it. And it's just incredibly satiating. You can throw some butter in there. So if you're ever really hungry and just want like a quick satiating snack, you can boil some bone broth, throw some butter in there, and you've got, it's probably like 100, 200 calories, good fat, and it's really nourishing for the gut microbiome. But yeah, I would say that's, typical day of meals.
Yeah, I always say, like, I think some people might complain and say that if they're eating a meat-based diet, that it can get expensive, but ground beef is a great way to go, as sort of like, I don't know, you can get like I order from Force of Nature a lot of times. I don't know if you're familiar with that company. Yeah.
Yes.
Regenerative farming, and they got, actually I've been ordering they're starting to make some stuff that you can have, like, well, you could have it whenever you want, but it's like, I don't really eat sausage, but it's a venison and beef sausage. It's I think I had it with eggs
Really
today.
good.
It was really really good.
Really good. Wow.
Yeah, have you had that, Brett? Have you had?
We have, yeah,
Yeah.
we've had that, and we've actually interviewed Taylor. We've had Taylor Collins on the show too, who founded Force of Nature. He's an amazing guy.
Yeah, I'll have to get him on, because I use their products enough.
Yeah.
Their whole business is amazing, and
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of what they're doing. It's like they're building out this regenerative supply chain, and the quality of the actual meat is so good. That's like honestly one of the companies that got Brett and I really interested in talking about the food system more, is Force of Nature and White Oak Pastures, which is another company that we've ordered from directly. There's great brands. So yeah, it's cool that you're using them.
Yeah, and it's nice because they make those blends, right? Those ancestral blends with the organ meats in there. Do you guys, other than maybe getting the blends and getting some, do you get organs from anywhere else?
Yeah, we have a farm that recently sponsored our podcast. They're called Holy Cow Beef. They're a family-owned farm out of Lubbock, Texas. The husband, Weldon, was a former financial advisor, and they were just on the typical like standard American diet. And he ended up having a stroke when he was 42. And they started digging into like the Weston A. Price rabbit hole, eating more animal-based foods, cooking all their meals, changing their diet. And he ended up like reversing a ton of those symptoms. And he's over 60. And then Anne, his wife, is 59, and they're in amazing shape. And they take incredible good care of their animals. It's all grass-fed, grass-finished, amazing omega-6 to omega-3 profile. And the point of me saying that is that they've been supplying us with meat, and their liver is like incredibly nutrient dense and really delicious. So for me, like I don't really mind the taste of raw liver that much. I don't cook it because I think it's so easy to overcook it, and that's where it gets that kind of like metallic taste that rubs people the wrong way. But I literally just cut up like an ounce of liver in the morning. I chop it into little pieces, and I just throw it on a spoon and just mix it back with water. But also, if anyone's squirmish, what they can do is they could just throw the whole liver into the freezer and chop off like little capsules and just pop it like a pill. And you're still getting all the good quality nutrients. And it's way cheaper than like a $50 bottle of liver capsules that are they're dried and they're way less nutrient dense than the real raw form of organ meat.
Yeah. Well, that's a good tip. And is it called the company called Holy Cow Meat? Is that
Holy
it?
cow,
Yeah.
yes.
Holy Cow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to check them out. Yeah, you know what? The nice thing is yeah, go ahead, Harry. What were you gonna say?
Sorry to cut you off. I was just gonna add, like, I think the important part with the liver is like the quality for that really matters. Because if they do have, antibiotics in their system for whatever reason, you don't want to be eating that animal's liver, because those things get stored in the organs before the muscle tissue and everything else. So I think it's important to note that.
Yeah. That's a good point. And it's great. There are a lot of these companies popping up. So like my wife and I, we always like stock the freezer every month. Like I have not bought a part of a cow like you have, Harry, but there's a few local farms, and I wanted to speak or talk a little bit more about the raw dairy, because I've been going to a farm, not every week, but there's literally a line. You got to get there before it opens to get raw dairy, because there's probably only like one farm, maybe a couple in Illinois that I know of, that you can get raw dairy from. Is that something you guys like try to get in your area? I don't know, Harry, where are you located?
Yeah, I'm in Austin, and I'll drive. So there's one person who shows up or one farm that shows up to the farmer's market that provides raw dairy called Richardson's Farm. And there's another one that's about a 45-minute drive in LaGrange, Texas, called the Jersey Barnyard, that I actually usually end up driving out to them. But same thing. I've showed up there. I stupidly didn't call ahead of time,
Yeah,
but it was like a Tuesday, and I was like, I'm just gonna go get my raw milk, get out there early. And I got out there early, and they're like it's been so dry. And demand is crazy. We don't have any raw milk right now. But it's something, I mean, I love it. I think it's an absolute superfood. Pasteurized milk for me is just you're missing out on all the benefits of what real milk actually is. So I think that it's a shame that some states don't really provide access to it, but it's an amazing food. I use it as like, post-workout. There's not a better post-workout shake than pure raw milk.
Mm-hmm.
Brett, is this something that you get as well? Were you in San Diego?
I'm in San Diego. So the interesting thing about raw milk, right, is it's on a state by state basis. So there are a lot of states where you can't even get yourself raw milk if you want it. So technically, California, raw milk is legal, but there's basically two farms that almost have like this monopoly on the raw dairy. So one of the farms, I'm not going to name them by name, but one of the farms, they supply every single Sprouts in California. So to be able to supply every single Sprouts, they have to be a massive farm. And what you feed the cow really matters. You want those true grass-fed cows. And I've read that they actually supplement like cornmeal cakes and things like that. And what I notice is when I go to visit Harry in Texas and we go out to the barnyard, my stomach digests that milk that's all grass-fed milk far better than the stuff that I can get in California. So it's like I will drink it, but I don't drink it nearly as much as if I was in Texas and had access to an actual farm, because it really does matter. But I mean, even just like the experience that Harry has, it's like raw milk is one of the most pure interactions that you could possibly have, because you're trusting this farmer to raise their cows the right way, to raise them on grass, to keep the cow clean. And they're also intentionally, like when you're at a big conventional dairy, those cows could be getting pumped 5 gallons of milk a day, just overproduction, maximizing for profit. Where like the farm, like the Jersey Barnyard that Harry goes to, they're intentionally stopping them at like a gallon and a half a day to ensure that the cow has the best quality life possible. And then on top of that, it's so nutrient dense, right? It's like an amazing source of cholesterol, saturated fat, fat soluble vitamins, digestive enzymes. And a lot of that stuff really gets denatured and destroyed when you're pasteurizing your milk because you're heating it up. A USDA procedure to try and protect people from the bacteria, which is like really a very outdated policy that Harry's written extensively about. But it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, don't worry, Harry. The first time I went to the farm, they have a certain amount allotted, and there was this long line. I'm like, all right, I'll get in there. I was the cutoff. I was like, yeah,
dude,
yeah.
that's terrible.
Waited an hour, and I ended up buying a few other things and left. But I learned my lesson.
Was anyone nice enough to spare some for you?
Not for a big price.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that's sought out for. I think people are learning more about it, especially people who do have gut issues, right, Brett? Because you can tolerate it more. It can be more tolerable. Correct.
Totally, 100%. And there's certain people that even with the raw, they'll still struggle just drinking straight up raw milk. It's like a case by case thing. But fermented forms of raw milk like kefir and yogurt and different types of dairy, like those are incredibly healing, and most people should be able to tolerate those. And not only tolerate it, should be able to help with your gut, improving the microbiome.
Yeah, and just to move topics a little bit, a question that gets asked is, what about chicken? I saw a post. You guys did this post a little while back about how the size of the chicken has increased by like 4 times. It looks like from the 50s all the way till today. What do you guys have? What are your thoughts on chicken? Because I think back in the day, it was like the bodybuilders. It was like chicken and rice was the diet. I think things have changed a little bit since then.
Yeah, I think chicken's an interesting one because it's so accessible. It's easy to. It's actually talking about this with a buddy. Like the life cycle to breed chickens and grow them to full size is a couple of weeks. For cows, it's 36 months. So you can just pump through chicken and create this protein for people. Usually they're being fed corn and soy, which shows up in their fat content. So it's typically a higher level of linoleic acid, which is kind of that polyunsaturated fat that's going to create some inflammation in the system. It's not as good as stearic acid from an inflammation perspective, which is what beef is mostly, which is the fat that's in beef mostly. So I think when it comes to chicken, you need to be really intentional about where you're getting it from. Unfortunately, and I love the taste of chicken when you get high quality chicken. Like the skin, I think is actually a great part of the chicken to be eating. But like most people aren't eating the high quality chicken. They're eating like the quick chicken nuggets or like grab and go chicken on a salad in an airport, which is usually the worst quality chicken. Most chickens aren't raised on pasture like in foraging meat like they should be. So there's a lot of different narratives around this topic that around poultry that I think need to be examined a little bit further. Brett, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
no, I think you did a great job. And I think to your point, it's a very nuanced topic as well. Because people are very opinionated on social media when it comes to this stuff. But it's funny, Brian, that you mentioned the chicken breast and rice is like the bodybuilding diet, because that's something that a lot of like the mass monsters, they're called, of today's modern bodybuilders, that's a lot of what they eat. But when you look back to the golden era bodybuilders, like in Schwarzenegger's age and Tom Platz's age, those guys are considered to have like the best physiques of all time. And they basically were eating animal-based diets, and they were eating a ton of saturated fat and a ton of cholesterol, steaks, ground beef, raw dairy, ton of eggs, egg yolks, liver, etc. So I think that's just like an interesting point. But to everything that Harry said, it's like we're basically eating massive baby birds, where we're killing the birds way shorter in their lifespan. And they're also getting way fatter, which is kind of taking the nutrition and the taste and the flavor. And as Harry mentioned, they're pretty much all eating corn and soy. But with that being said, like number one, both of us are trying to buy our chickens from like a local farm where we know that they're out in the yard eating a species appropriate diet that tastes really good. They're typically a little bit smaller, and I incorporate that into my diet a good amount. Like I do eat primarily red meat, but there are plenty of nights where I'll make some steak or I'll throw like a chicken thigh or two to accompany it because I enjoy the taste of chicken and it still is nutrient dense if you're getting it from the right source. But even if you're someone that maybe doesn't have a budget to be sourcing all your stuff from the farm, if your starting point is just, hey, I can only afford grocery store meat, whether that's chicken, ground beef, steak, I would still prefer you to eat the corn and soy fed chicken as opposed to the inner crap in the inner aisle of the grocery store. So it's like you can't let perfection get in the way of just starting and being really good, because that's still a good starting point and you'll get healthier and source the right stuff over time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Sometimes it's easy to get caught up on all the nuance of all this, right? Like, especially like with people ask me these questions with fasting. Oh, does this break my fast? Or what should I, when can I have, like, obviously cream and coffee, that's a big one.
Yes.
But like, I know you guys were with I don't know if the Dr. Benazati, or not Dr., but Benazati, a keto camp guy, and he always talks about like coffee and cream those are like fasting training wheels, maybe like things that just get you through. And so I think that, for like you said, it's easy to get caught up in all the nuance, and I think it's important to just come with a goal in mind. Like what is the goal of what you're trying to do? And like you said, if you're just starting out, you don't have to go spend these grass-fed, grass-finished ribeyes and spend all this money. You can get ground beef and not break the bank, and even obviously quality eggs and things like that, just to get started.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like everyone's at a different spot, right? Like Brett and I can sit here all day and talk about how we're like idealist and basically shoot for perfection with how we're dieting, but that's just totally unattainable and unrealistic for someone who's just getting started. So it's I think it's a huge point. It's part of the reason why people who are just getting started feel so much pressure, is because you look at these people who have success when it comes to eating healthy, and they're talking about like threading the needle and do like, it's like looking at an Olympic athlete's workout program and being like, yeah, I'm never going to be able to do that. Like it takes time to get there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Start slow, right? Start slow with all of it. Well, any last tips you guys want to give? Usually I ask, and I guess I'll have you each can chime in on like, what one tip would you give someone that's maybe looking to, get their bodies back, and maybe they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they've gone down sort of the wrong road of health. What kind of tips would you give those individuals just starting out?
Yeah, I think we hit on it, but one thing that really sticks with me is how distant we've grown from our food system and from the process of actually uh, going and getting high quality ingredients. But then we touched on this, cooking your own meals. If there's one thing you can do for yourself to really start to control what direction your health is going in, it's go and just start making meals from scratch. So like, go learn one recipe a week that is going to be really healthy, and just build on that. Start like that's what worked best for me. I started like learning how to use a Dutch oven to create a chuck roast, and then that evolved into all these different recipes that I started making, a big salad that had a bunch of beef on it. It's like these things just compound, and once you know how to do it once, you'll always be able to go back to it. So I think it's just an element of health that's very understated. You can also, if you're someone who has kids, you can educate your kids on how to cook their own meals and get them involved and get them excited, and just share these experiences with your family through really high quality meals. I think there's a lot of different ways to kind of prove the worth of that one core principle, but I really do think that it's important for people to start doing and really embracing.
Yeah. And Brett, what about you? What's your one tip?
I would say that my one tip builds off of Harry's, and I forget, Brian, you said something earlier that reminded me of this. I would say like give yourself the ability to actually have like the compounding interest of success from changing your diet and lifestyle. And what I mean by that is because of all the different inputs, all the different diets, all the different nuances, this stuff is so dogmatic. It's so easy to switch things up and get discouraged and get complacent and get off the diet. Where it's like, hey, maybe you tried it for 4 days or a week.
Right.
That's really not enough time. Like, commit to just choosing something for a month, whether it's just being no sugars, no grains, whether it's being paleo, keto, carnivore. Just commit to doing something for 30 days. Give yourself a set of rules and just commit to that for 30 days and see how you feel. And I would be shocked if you don't feel immediately better. Like, all the stuff that the three of us are talking about, it's very simple, right? It's cooking your own meals. It's eating real foods. It's getting daily sunlight exposure. It's walking 10,000 steps a day. It's incorporating like a 10-minute meditation. It's just doing a couple of those things and doing it over and over again, and trusting the process, the fact that over time you're going to get healthier. And like Harry, he just started off walking, and then he incorporated ring dips. Then he started doing, more weight training, and then he signed up for an Ironman. But the point is, it's like, it was the walking that eventually led to the Ironman. He didn't just throw himself right into the deep end. So I think it's just that trust of the process of just be very consistent, let yourself compound, and realize that it's like fitness is one of the fairest pursuits ever, because if you commit to it, you will get healthier, no matter if you're a male or a female or what your race is or your weight is. Like, it's one of the fairest pursuits. So that's what I would say is my one thing.
Well said. That was more than one thing, but
it was like 20. It was like 20 things, but that's how it goes.
You know what though? But your point about like that compounding effect. I was just on an interview and they asked me my favorite book. There's a book, Slight Edge. Have you guys heard of that book?
No.
It's a good one. You guys would like it, right up your alley.
Okay.
Slight Edge, Jeff Olson. He just talks about that, just putting time on your side and doing those small little things. And Brett, we could have just recorded you in the last few minutes and we'd be done.
The whole
podcast. Done. The whole podcast.
Honestly, that's it right there.
There's your clip.
Yeah, right. And you guys are on the Meat Mafia podcast, best place. And I know you have a newsletter and is it a subscription model based?
Yeah, we have a free Substack that comes out every Friday. Just usually like 5 topics that we write on, and some things that are happening in the world of the Meat Mafia in terms of podcast guests that we've had on, or some appearances that we do. So, just kind of keeping our audience up to date on things that are happening with us. But I think that our Instagram page, both of our Twitter handles are great places to find us as well. And then we have that Substack page. So check us out if you are listening, and we really appreciate the support.
Awesome. Yeah, I was checking that out. It's nice. You can sort of go in the inside and see what's going on, and then if you really like it, you can subscribe, which I like that, how you guys do that.
Yeah, and for the free subscribers, it's like our goal is, I think there's like 95 days left in the year, and we have a commitment to publish a new article every single morning for our free subscribers. So you're still getting a ton of value with the free version.
God, I wonder what the paid version gets.
A lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Well, Brett and Harry, thank you so much for coming on. My first actually, it's my second dual podcast, so this was fun, and look forward to. I'm going to definitely check out your Substack and all your articles that you write, and for all you guys do, thanks so much for coming on.
Awesome, appreciate it, Brian.
Thanks Brian.
For having us.
Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangryn.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.